Hello there. Welcome to the Casper Planetarium's Astronomy Podcast. My name is Rod. So what we're going to do, yesterday we talked a little bit about the star Polaris and some of the circumpolar constellations. Today we're going to talk about some of the constellations we see in our evening sky. So I've set our sky to tonight, March 25th at about 8:30 p.m. Now, if you look towards the west-southwest, you see a lot of really bright objects here. And the most obvious one right here will look really, really, really bright in the sky. And this object right here is the planet Venus. Now, it's interesting to note that if you look at Venus with a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, you can actually watch Venus go through phases just like the moon does. Well, if we go a little above Venus right here in this part of the sky, just above where Venus is, if we zoom in, we notice a little shape that looks a little bit like a dipper. And sometimes this gets mistaken for one of the dippers. This is actually the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters. Pleiades is actually a Japanese name for the Pleiades. The Pleiades is, in Japanese, is Subaru. Now, the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters, is part of this constellation right here. This is the constellation Taurus, the bull. And the Pleiades marks the shoulder of Taurus. Up here in his eye is the star Aldebaran, and this V shape is another group of stars, another star cluster sort of like the Pleiades, called the Hyades. Well, if we go from Taurus and we go a little more towards the west, we see one of the most famous constellations in the sky, Orion the Hunter. And Orion is one of the few constellations that actually looks like what he is supposed to. Now, Orion has several really bright stars to it. The orangish colored star in his shoulder up here is the star Betelgeuse. And if we go directly opposite Betelgeuse, down in this corner, we see the star Rigel. Now, to our eyes, Rigel looks kind of bluish-white in color. The star Betelgeuse looks red or orange. Now, it's rather interesting because in the last couple of months, Betelgeuse has slowly been dimming. And that's because Betelgeuse is what we call a variable star. It changes its brightness over a period of time. Now, if you happen to have a small telescope or a pair of binoculars, these three stars mark Orion's belt, and hanging down from his belt is his sword. And if we zoom in on the center part of the sword, we see sort of this fuzzy patch of light. This is M42, the Orion Nebula. And the Orion Nebula is a stellar nursery. It is a place where new stars are being born. I'll post more about that on our Facebook page. So this is a couple of the constellations that we can see in the evening sky in the southwestern part of the sky after sunset. And these constellations are slowly slipping into the west. They're wintertime constellations. And as we get into spring, they will no longer be visible. So we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, about why we see different constellations in the sky during different times of year. If we were to turn towards the east, we can see a couple of springtime constellations, primarily Leo. We'll talk more about why we see different constellations during different times of year in tomorrow's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Keep an eye out on our Facebook page. We're thinking about doing a live event sometime this week. So go to our Facebook page, and if you have a topic you'd like to learn more about, be sure to post it there. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.